supporting them. I'll try to actually do it every day. It's just with 310 and this being after my brain's usually a little scrambled after the first class. However, I'm going to teach you guys straight from a packet of notes that was given to me at Auburn from Dr. Weimer and Dr. Madsen. Now, Dr. Weimer was the biomechanist. She was my mentor. But Dr. Madsen, he's the engineer that just loves sports. And I've used his name before. Like, this dude is he's like Gandalf the White. He is the most brilliant person that I've ever been in a classroom with. But he was humble about it. He made things, he's like the astrophysicist that you may hear that kind of brings everything down to reality, where you're like, well, maybe astrophysics isn't that hard, but it's really hard. This is the guy whose motion capture software was able to do Lord of the Rings, and he won an Academy Award for it. So this is mechanical jargon, but we're going to apply it to, hey, this is found here, or this would be found there, okay? So I know it's very like mechanically based, but we're going to apply it to things that we use every day to make it biomechanical, okay? Also, after the lecture, I have the packet up here if you want to take photos of it, but it's going to be on the video. Or if someone wants to step up and say, look, I'll scan it and send you the PDF, and then I can post it on Moodle. It's whatever you guys want or need, okay? So, machines. Our bodies have a really unique way of efficiency. Of examples that I've given in the past is like our knees lock into place so that we can stand and not rely on our muscles of our legs having to maintain we can rely on bone supporting bone instead of muscles having to support. So we have all these kind of neat tricks and things that we have, and a lot of that is through the concepts of machines. So on the first thing is 3 types of machines in the body: levers, pulleys, and then the wheel and axles. Levers is our segue from moments. Okay? That's what moment verbiage is. And the rotational influences that we have in our bodies serve one or more functions of simple machines. One of those could be to balance 2 or more forces. And 2 or more forces could be resistance, gravity, external forces, but our internal forces are also playing this game as well. I'll give you a very simple example of this function. To balance 2 or more forces. You're doing a stork stand test, or you're doing some training and someone's tossing a ball and you're tossing it back. Your subtalar joint is acting like a weeble wobble. It's acting like a seesaw. And you have gravity that's kind of like on the seesaw's axis, but gravity could shift this way and want to make your seesaw do this, so you got to pull with some muscles to make, so you're constantly trying to keep your center of mass or your base of support by constantly fluctuating the inverters and the everters, just as an example. Okay? So to balance 2 or more forces in that type of leverage. In our cervical, we balance stuff all the time. The mass of our head is in front of our spine on purpose so that we can always maintain tension of those erector spinae muscles. And I see this when sometimes students have fallen asleep. They'll pop up. Because on this seesaw, you have more stuff here than back there because you want these muscles to be engaged. You want those muscles to have tension because you never know when a threat will come up and you have to reposition your eyes to see what's going on. You don't have the lag that it would take of a rested muscle to turn on and activate. You need to be able to turn and look right away. Okay? To provide an advantage in force. And when I say force, in biomechanical terms, I'm talking about your muscles, to give your muscles an advantage. So in classical mechanics, we say a wrench or a screwdriver, right? You have this extra length to the rotation that can help with the torque or the moment. And we're going to have the same thing. We're going to have muscles that insert far away from an axis that gives it a similar mechanical advantage in the application of its force. Remember the old trade-off of speed and force when we were doing our movement strategies? You have the same trade-off in functions of simple machines. What you gain in one, you lose in the other. So imagine if you had a ladder and it had different rungs, and that ladder was, I attached a rope to the last rung. I could easily lift it up with mechanical advantage of force. It's applied farther away, no problem. It'd be very hard to lift it up if I applied it to the first rung. Right? I don't have as much mechanical advantage in terms of perpendicular distance. But what if I could? What if that ladder became a rake, super light, and I stepped on the prong? What it would snap up super fast, right? If you could produce significant torque with a small moment on, you can then get a lot of speed and range of motion. We're going to have some muscles that insert very close to our axis, and we don't have to move very heavy things, and we can move very fast. You have certain muscles in the hip that cross and insert like the prongs of a rake that can help flex that hip to a sweeping range of motion with just a little bit of muscle contraction. And then you have other muscles that insert super far away, like at the last rung of the brake, that are going to be great at slowing down movement, like putting on the brake, throwing out the anchor, and then the sprinter's going to be boom. So like we have different muscles that have different advantages when it comes to moving things fast or moving things with a lot of force. Now, one thing you're going to hear me say a lot, and I just need to say it because I love this analogy. Usain Bolt, the fastest human that's ever lived, he can choose to run as fast as me. He can choose to jog. I can't choose to run as fast as Usain Bolt. So when you're doing these simultaneous movements that require a lot of force, any muscle, regardless of its leverage type and close to, far away, anybody can help. Because as you know, if you're doing a max, your spotter, all it may take is just a little bit of a push, right? And then it starts moving again. It doesn't take a lot. However, when it comes to moving fast, those muscles that have the advantage of force, they're like, dude, I can't sprint with you, man. I'm out. I can't run fast enough to contribute to the speed that you need. So it doesn't have to go both ways. Usain Bolt can choose to jog. I can't choose to sprint. Okay? All right, let's get back to functions of a simple machine. Provide advantage in range of motion and speed of movement. That's just what I was talking about. You're going to have certain leverage advantages to speed and range of motion. Your erector spinae inserted super close to your cervical vertebra means that all you have to do is contract a little bit of distance for you to get a huge range of motion in your neck. Again, what's that, brother? Look over here, look over there. Like, all they have to do is contract a little bit and get a huge range of motion. Right? Change the effective direction of an applied force. Guys, that is a fancy way of saying something super simple. Your neck muscles contract by pulling the base of your skull down so that your eyes can look up. Your hamstrings pull on your pelvis and they contract, pulling your ischial tuberosities down so that the front of your body can come up. That's all that means. That sometimes in our human movement, we have things pulling down so that the other side can come up. Just like imagine a teeter-totter. If I pull this side down, the other side goes up. In our body, we have similar kind of examples. My hamstrings pull my ischial tube down so that the rest of my body on the other side can come up. That's all that means. In classical mechanics, there's a boulder stuck, and so I wedge a lever and I pull down and the other end pushes the boulder up. Okay? But in our bodies, that's how we look at it. We'll have muscles that pull one side down so that whatever's on the other side can go up, or vice versa. All right, let's look at levers. Levers are a simple machine with 5 components. We've hinted at this before, but this is the so what. We have to have an axis of rotation. In mechanics, they have a fancy term called forward. It's the same thing. Okay? We are going to have forces and resistances. Resistances for our body is the next level of 310. The stuff outside. What's your external forces? Your external forces is your resistance. The weight that you're doing in the machine, friction forces, ground reaction forces, that's all resistances. And our muscle forces, the internal forces, that's what we're going to term F's. Okay? So, you have an axis. You have an applied force that for us is going to be a muscle as we look at muscle. You're going to have a resistance. That's going to be the mat, weight, gravity, the machine, the ground, whatever exercise we're doing. Okay? So I just want to separate. They're both forces. But to separate the ones we're talking about in layman's terms, the force is going to be the muscle force. And the resistance is going to be the stuff that the muscle force is playing to tug of war against. Okay? Each of those influences have perspective moment arms. Perpendicular distances from the force application to the axis of rotation. Remember, perpendicular, guys. Parallel distance is irrelevant. You can have a 2-mile parallel distance and try to push into a merry-go-round, and those kids are going to not be happy because there's nothing trying to spin the merry-go-round to make them have fun. The force has to be perpendicular. That's like taking a jar of pickles and just trying to pry it open. You have to get a rotational in. I don't like pickles. Just thought I'd share. All right, so we have 4 points, 4 parts. 5 parts with the axis. All right, let's move on. So let's look at this concept in action, right? So if you notice, if our force, so this would be a propeller, the only way the force is going to try to create a moment is if it's applied perpendicular to the axis. If this arrow was like in the negative x, it wouldn't be trying to spin the propeller at all. Make sense? And if this was at an angle, only a component of that force would be trying to spin. And that's what I was trying to say last time. I just don't think I did a very good job of it. If this arrow was angled, I could either look at all of the force with just a component distance, or all of the distance with a component force. It just so happens that both of these are all component. You get all of the force and all of the distance. But remember, muscles are always kind of pulling at angles. And so the same moment is a component of the muscle with all of the distance, or a component of the distance, all the muscle with a component of the distance, or all of the difference with a component of the muscle. You get to the same thing. So what this is saying is if these 3 forces have equivalent magnitude, they're going to look the same to the propeller. In other words, the rotational influence doesn't matter that one's going down, one's going to the right. one's going at an angle, because even though the force to the right is at an angle, so is the propeller. It stays perpendicular. That perpendicularity for all three stayed the same. There was a right angle there.
Is this on Google or is this in the book?
I'm recording this lecture, and I'm going to post it, and then I'm going to scan that, and I'm going to put it on the ground. You're welcome. Okay? All right. Whoa, a little too far. So with levers, we have force moment arms, resistance moment arms. So applying it to what we've already talked about, the resistance, if I'm doing lateral raises, right? My resistance moment arm would kind of be 0 down here. You know, it's not trying to ab or adduct my shoulders. So therefore, my force moment, my muscles wouldn't have to be playing tug of war or doing anything against it rotationally. That doesn't mean my muscles wouldn't be doing something stability-wise. You know, you grab heavy dumbbells, you feel your muscles pump up. That's all stability. That's preventing the weight from doing this, okay? As I abduct, the resistance moment arm is going to get greater and greater and greater and greater. And because the weight is the same, the resistance moment or torque is going to get greater and greater and greater. The perpendicular distance goes greater, so therefore the overall rotational influence has to be greater. Does that make sense? So if the resistance moment gets greater and greater and greater, my muscles have no choice but to pull harder and harder and harder, because they don't have that ability to detach and then go reattach somewhere else. Their only option is to pull harder, work harder, give more effort. Make sense?
Just need to know if it happens. The moment is any time. Same thing would be a moment if you had a weight on your foot and you were flexing right here. That moment would be the same thing because the torque is increasing as your leg increases, right? The same way that.
Yeah, so if you had like an ankle cuff weight, and you say, okay, I have a 0 moment at my knee, and now the moment is getting greater and greater and greater and greater and greater at my knee. So therefore, my quads have to work isometrically greater and greater and greater and greater to prevent the knee from flexing.
And that's just with levers or is that the machines?
Well, remember machines, so one of the limitations with dumbbells is you are bound by one direction of gravity. Right? So machines have the potential to redirect their application. So a machine has the ability to do stuff like this, to redirect, which is great for maintaining muscle moment against resistance moment, right? What are the negatives about machines? They cost and they take up space. That's the negative. So understanding the limitations, we can get creative. Like if I'm trying to create more resistance moment in a different range of motion, then maybe I lean, and now my greatest resistance moment is here, which is actually at this angle of my shoulder. My arm is still perpendicular to gravity, but because I'm leaning my socket, now I'm at a different angle than I was here, right? By being able to kind of apply this, it gives us the tools to be able to play against some of those limitations of gravity when all we have to work with are dumbbells or home health, or you go in and you have ankle cuffs and you have, you can't just bring, fully functioning, machines out there. Okay. This is key. I know I've said it, but I'm trying to put into better written word than what I just said. Lever systems only act in rotational motion And as such, the lines of force cannot pass through the axis of rotation. Like they can't be parallel to the axis. Any force that acts through the axis of rotation will not produce a moment. It's, again, like me pushing into the hinge of the door and thinking that I'm trying to open and close the door. But if I leaned on the wall this way, I'd try to open. So in sports, I think we use this a lot of times in like collision sports, contact sports, let's say like football, where understanding leverage, when I was growing up, low man wins, or understanding how like if someone's coming to block you and I can swipe their hands, I'm producing a rotational influence as opposed to just trying to go straight through. Okay. So this is basically your muscle rotational influence times its moment arm is going to be working proportional to whatever the weight or the exercise is times its moment arm. That's all it is. In other words, the greater your resistance or your exercise, the more your muscles are going to have to work against it. That is just saying this gets harder and harder and harder. The muscles work harder because this is getting bigger. That's all this is saying. And as you lower it down, as this gets less, your muscles don't have to work as hard. That's all that's saying. The weight stays the same, but the moment will fluctuate. That's all this is saying. In an example like the lateral raise. Same weight, but the resistant moment arm is going to get greater and greater and greater and greater and greater. So this whole product is going to get greater and greater and greater and greater and greater. My muscles, such as my deltoid, they can't choose to reattach further and further and further away. So their only option to combat the increased resistant moment is just to yank harder to pull with more force. And lucky for us, we can do that. We can ramp them up. We can recruit them up.
What's the FMA stuff?
FMA. That sounds so bad. It's the force moment arm. Your muscles, rotational influence. Now remember, not all of your muscles pull is rotational. But your muscles play a huge role in stability, absolutely. So of that muscle's pull, you only get a fraction that we would have to determine through trigonometry to say this is actually how much of it is actually going up against this.
Does your, so if the RNA increases and the weight stays the same, so the force has to increase, does the FMA stay the same?
Yeah. Because that FMA is the muscle's insertion. It's indirectly, but the muscle is bound by how it inserts. It can't choose to detach and pull. Like remember with the ladder example, if I have a muscle that's pulling on the third rung and that ladder gets heavier, my only option is to yank with more force. I can't detach and go reattach on the first rung. Now, lucky for us, it's not a 1v1, I learned that from my sons. It's not a 1v1 challenge because you have other muscles that are there to help you, right? You will have certain muscles that can, no one muscle, you know, we actually did this in pre-10. That's why we looked at muscles in groups, teams, because although Michael Jordan was a very, very important player, he was on a team. So one of the reasons we have teams of muscles is because one muscle alone, it'd be an impossible task for one muscle to have to go against any changing resistance moment on by themselves. So for an exercise, this goes up, this has to go up. And if this can't change, that's got to really go up. Cool. All right, let's talk about classes of levers and how we're going to apply this in the body. When classifying levers, we only need to look at 3 of the 5 components. Point of the force application, that's going to be eventually our muscle, where our muscle is inserting when we look at all these different muscles. The axis is going to be the joint, elbow, knee, and then the resistance is going to be the point about which our weight or resistance is also trying to rotate our joint. Layman's terms, we're good? Okay. In a first class, you have 3 classes, and that's only because you have 3 different options of where the axis could be between. It's really the only option you have is the axis could be in between your muscle and the resistance, like a traditional seesaw. Your muscle could be between the resistance and the axis, like doing curls, and my elbow, here's my bicep, and the resistance is out. Okay. Or you could have the muscle or the resistance in between your muscle and the axis. So if I didn't have any dumbbell weight to kind of shift my center of mass, and all I had was the weight of my arm, so the center of my arm would be like, say, somewhere right here. I have a muscle called the brachioradialis that inserts way over here on the radiostylor. So from that muscle's perspective, it's pulling on like the last rung of the ladder. Huge mechanical advantage of torque. It's not going to be fast because it's got to cover a huge arc distance to make it happen. But that muscle has a advantage in moment production because of its distance away from the elbow. Okay. So what I'm going to teach you in here, it's going to take a little time, but that's okay. That leverage for us humans, leverage from an engineer standpoint is just about that. And the hinge on the door stays the hinge on the door. But leverage for us isn't about the ankle, the knee. It's about the muscles, the specific muscles. And I'll give you a ton of examples why. But what we cannot say in biomechanics is the ankle is A. Can't do that. We can't say the knee is A, first, second, third. We can't say the hip is A. And again, the reason is because your hip, yes, has an axis, but you have some muscles that insert super close. And you have some muscles that insert super far. And the ones that insert close have a certain advantage in leverage. And the ones that insert far have a different advantage in leverage. And so you can't, I know there's a word that's escaping me, but let's say all the muscles have the same advantage at the same joint. Because that's not true.
You talked about the speed of muscles.
Mm-hmm.
You said the bicep works really well because it's at that end. It has like on the end of that ladder, you said, right? You say that lower muscle improvements, like lower muscles pulling on one joint, would make it faster, or is it that leverage that makes it fast?
Yeah.
You're saying?
Your bicep and your brachialis insert very close to the elbow. Okay. So an open chain, world gets freaky when we close stuff. Okay. So we're gonna start with open. In open, you rarely lift stuff like this. It's super rare. Like again, Usain Bolt's a sprinter. How much of his life does he actually sprint? So for your distal segment like this, the most important thing for you to do is to be able to flex your elbows fast, whether that's to defend yourself or to move absolutely all up. So your bicep and your brachialis insert very close. So that way, all they have to do is contract a very short distance linearly But because of the moment arm being so close, you get this huge arc distance of motion angle. It's like, again, stepping on the rake and it goes flying over. Brachioradialis, though, doesn't have that same advantage. Because it inserts super far away, when you flex the elbow fast, the brachioradius, I'm not a sprinter, man. I'm out. I can't even, I'm going to just stay off because I can't contract fast enough for you guys that are trying to flex my elbow fast. Same thing with the gastroc. When you flex your knee fast, because your hamstrings have like that advantage of speed when you're in open chain, the gastroc that crosses early and inserts far away, the gastroc like, dude, I'm out. Let me know when you need to do something heavy or when you can jog.
So it's that closeness as well as the short contraction is what makes it.
It's especially the closeness is what makes that contraction not have to be there. Yeah.
So you can't identify the joint as a, how do you
You're with me? By the muscle.
by the insertion?
By the muscle, yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to define our levers by the muscle. So in other words, when we finish up this page, you're going to see the advantages of levers. You're going to see that third class favors speed. You're going to see that second class favors torque or force or moment at the disadvantage of speed. I mean, it really goes back to simultaneous and sequential things. You're going to see these advantages and disadvantages. And then when we actually look at our muscles one at a time, I'm going to say, okay, look at that gastroc medius, and it's pulling on the calcaneus, and look how close that is to the ankle bone, right? It's going to have a third class advantage. I'm going to use terms like that. It's going to have a third class leverage advantage that maybe other muscles don't have, that cross and then go insert into the toes. All right? So not every muscle has the same advantage. So that's why we can't say that ankle is A or the knee is A. Another good example, I think, is like the rectus femoris as a muscle. The rectus femoris crosses the hip early, but then it goes all the way down and inserts way over there in the knee. So if I'm trying to sprint, rectus is like, dude, when you try to flex the hip as fast as you can, I'm out, because I'm not a sprinter. But you know what I can do? When you go to slow down the hip extension, I'm in. And it's going to help to slow down the hip extension through eccentrics, because it literally is running the whole length of that femur. It can slow everything down. And then once you change direction, it's like, I'm out again, because I can't sprint fast enough. And so you're going to notice like that's where the damage, that's where the plyometrics damage, that's where the late onset muscle soreness, it's from these braking muscles that we, here's another example. Bang, oh, I hold my hamstring while kicking. Well, when you're flexing your hip and then extending the knee, the hamstrings cross the hip and insert way over there in the knee, and so they can pull very far away to slow down that hip flexion. You pull apart. So it has nothing to do with the hip. It has everything to do with the different muscles and how they insert and what their advantages and disadvantages are. Make sense? It's also, to me, it comes down to how we define things. You know, the ankle, and I've seen this in textbooks. They'll be like, well, the ankle is like a wheelbarrow. And they'll come up on their toes and say, you know, that's like a wheelbarrow. And I'll say, well, when you lift up on a wheelbarrow, you have multiple things that are rotating. The ankle isn't the wheel. You know what the wheel is? Your metatarsal phalangeal joint, like literally your toe hinging. That's the wheel. This is the wheel. Your calf muscle, the muscles, the plantar flexors, would be your hands lifting up. But your ankle is where the hands rotate about the handle. Just like your hands come up and your heel comes up,
So you have to define it. It's unfair to just say the ankle is a. It's the ankles are your hand relative to the handles. The wheel is your metatarsal phalangeal joints. And when those things work together, you have simultaneous movement where this cancels out with this to keep your sit. It's all about definition. But what's unfair is to say the ankle is a. Without all these other contexts. The elbow is a. And then that's not to count, again, open and close. Like the elbow is a, and then all of a sudden I'm doing push-ups and I don't have the same advantages. I actually flip. Things that had the advantage in speed when I'm closed now have an advantage of force. Because now I'm inserting soon and I'm pulling further away. We're going to get into that when we go into specific muscles. But what I'm saying is that without context, we can't generalize. The elbow is a, the shoulder is a, without the different muscles that are serving as the F's. There's not one F that serves at the elbow. And in textbooks and in previous lectures, they somehow think that the biceps brachii is the universal muscle of the elbow. And you have these other muscles that are like, hey man, what about me? I do stuff as well. So, and I'm never going to say this book is wrong. I'm saying they don't give more examples. They just say the elbow is a, because look at the bicep. And it's open chain with just the bicep. like it's in this one scenario. And so it's like, well, yeah, that's true, but what about the regular radialis? Or what about when you're in close chain? And what about this scenario, that scenario? Stuff like that. Let me give you, before I finish up the basic definitions, let me give you a really cool, for you throwers in baseball, javelin, baseball. When I was at Auburn, we knew this, but I was at a clinic and the guy there was talking and I politely raised my hand and I said, well, actually this. And the guy was just, I think he was a physical therapist. And he was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I was like, sorry. And the part that I brought up was that in throwing, pitching, javelin, whatever, when your elbow extends, you have no muscle activity at all. Your tricep is silent. Your anconeus is silent. And the reason is that thing is moving so fast, even a muscle that favors speed is like, there's nothing I can do. I can't contract fast enough to even contribute. It's just inertia. It's like popping a towel. You don't have a string at the tip that's yanking that tip. That tip's just going along for the ride. It's weird because a lot of times we mimic things in slow motion and we think about doing this, but those pros ain't doing that. Okay? So just another example of how like it situationally depends, but we cannot just say this is a this because of one muscle for any given joint. And it was a lovely question. If we don't do it based off of the axis or the joint, what do we do? What do we base the levers off of? The muscles. Specific muscles will have certain advantages and disadvantages based on their poles, based on their situation. It's going to be cool. And we're going to go through all the major ones. And we're going to talk about their leverage, advantages, and disadvantages. All right, let's wrap up. So, first classes can favor all 4 functions of a simple machine, just not at the same time. For our body, the biggest use of first class levers is for balance. That's what we use it mostly for. And I'll give you a ton of examples. When I'm standing, what's my resistance? Gravity of planet Earth passing through my mass. What is of importance? To keep that center of mass or center of gravity over my base of support. How would I do that? Well, I have flexors and extensors that can kind of help me balance. Some in the front, some in the back, teeter-totter,
So in essence, I have an F, and the R is like rolling in the middle. Like if it gets too far over here, I want to pull that way. And if it gets too far there, it's the stork stand with the inverters and the everters serving on each side of the teeter-totter, trying to keep the R over the base of support. But you do that front and backs, you do that from sides to sides, you do that from fronts and backs here, you do that from sides to sides here, you do that from fronts to backs and sides to sides. So there's no rule that says 2 or more. You can have 2 sets of muscles serving to help that teeter-totter stay balanced. You do that every day. In the case of your neck, you just have 1 set. You have your erector spinae pulling on one side with gravity pulling on the mass in the front side, trying to maintain your eye level. But it's a first-class function if the intent is to keep your eyes level. Could the erector spinae serve as a Not used to that. I should have got a different color like neon. Could it serve as like, look at this, where you could have an advantage in speed? So like this first class where we could shift the axis closer to the muscle or closer to the resistance, or mechanics closer to the force of resistance. And that would be like at a circus. If you'd see these gymnasts jump from high so that they could apply a huge force close to the axis, and it would whip the other gymnast up high in the air, right? Or a catapult. So that is. So that's what your erector spinae would be, pulling close to the axis, and you'd get this sweeping, fast extension. But again, there's purpose there. Majority of the time, you're using it as a first-class leverage for balance to keep your eyes level. But every now and then, you may hear something, and you may need to have that speed advantage. Okay? Some firsts can have an advantage in force. But notice the trade-off of speed. So on this one, this would be like a crowbar. This would be like a crowbar where you anchor it, you have this large force arm and the resistance, and when you use like a crowbar, you're going to get a lot of force application, but it's not going to go very fast, right? Okay. So the key thing is first-class leverage can serve all 4 functions of a simple machine: balance, advantage speed, advantage force, change direction of a platform, but it can't do it all at the same time. Just like we can't be fast and strong at the same time. So for our test, the main purpose of first-class leverage is going to be twofold: balance and change direction. So example, again, hamstrings, pull down the issue tube, pull it down so that the other end of the teeter-totter can come up. Cervical vertebra, pull down on the base of my skull so that my eyes can look up. Something had to move down so that the other part could go up. Does that make sense?
You said balance and change the direction first class?
That for your test, those are going to be the ones I'm going to hold you accountable for. Because it does get ridiculously confusing. Because first can be a sprinter, but it can be a thrower. But then third classes are going to just be sprinters, and second class are going to just be throwers. So when you start kind of doing the cans and can'ts, to me it defeats the whole purpose of just learning what the all-the-time advantages are. And that's what I'm trying to filter down, the all-the-time advantages. So the first, all the time for balance, all the time for redirection. And then what I'm going to finish up on Friday is that the seconds are all the time. Those are the people. Those are the offensive linemen who are ridiculously strong, but usually ridiculously slow. And the third classes, those are skill position players who are usually ridiculously fast, but usually not as ridiculously strong as the linemen.